On the phone, it is a pleasure to welcome back to the program the 2014 Hillman Prize for Opinion and Analysis Journalism, also now a recently minted contributor, writer for Salon.com, and of course the proprietor of the Uber blog Hullabaloo. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's Digby. Hi, Digby. Welcome back to the program.
Hey, Sam. Thanks for having me.
So congratulations on all of it. It is, if not timely, it is at least long overdue recognition of your great writing. I'm very happy that you're being recognized tomorrow in New York City.
Yes, I'm thrilled, really honored, and quite shocked. You and I remember maybe about a decade ago when the progressive movement, online netroots, internet upstarts were first starting off just kind of having a conversation with each other and, trying to live through the Bush years. I never expected anything to come of that. And over these years, writing every day and just trying to keep up with everything that's been going on, it sort of turned into a vocation and then finally a career, which is kind of interesting for someone at my stage in life to have that happen. But I couldn't be more thrilled. It's really an honor. I mean, great writers like Ta-Nehisi Coates and Marcy Wheeler was honored with this a couple of years back as well. So I'm really thrilled, and I'm looking forward to the ceremony tomorrow.
Yeah, there are so many people who are so excited upon hearing this. So I think your excitement is shared by tens of thousands, as far as I can tell, who have been reading you for years. And tell us, will you have an address tomorrow night? I mean, what are some of the things you're gonna talk about?
Well, you don't have a lot of time. I mean, there's not like a big speech, so it's just going to be a few minutes. And basically, I think. I'm still sort of deciding, but I think that what I will talk about is the fact this is an honor that was given to me for the full, decade of my daily blogging, and truly is daily. I mean, I write 7 days a week. But specifically, it was for my, writing about economic and social justice over the past year, and I think probably over the past 2 or 3 years, and so I think that's probably what I'm going to focus on, which is the fact that despite, and I don't think this was easy for people, despite the fact that we had a Democratic president, and despite the fact that we had an economic crisis of epic proportions, I think it was very hard to be critical and skeptical of what was going on in Washington, and that was, I think, what I tried to do to the best of my ability, to try and keep a clear head and try to look at the behaviors of Washington, the village, what I call the village, which is basically the political establishment, and try to analyze it as clearly as I could and give people a way to understand what was going on. And I think that effort, along with the efforts of many other progressives who were seeing the same things I was, we were able to at least put some pressure on the Democratic Party, as hard as that was to do, to not completely fall into the conventional wisdom that said that they had to cut entitlements, for instance, or any number of other things that were coming up during that period. There was at least a place where we were trying to push back on that and push the Democratic administration in the midst of this kind of chaotic time to recognize that there was going to be some pressure exerting from the left on this. And it was a very difficult thing to do. People were very enthusiastic about the new Democratic president. The health care bill was coming through. There was a lot going on, but this kind of intense focus that we tried to have, I think, in the progressive blogosphere and in other, lefty publications, programs like yours, where we were just not buying it. And I think that that's probably what I will I will address, was this idea that there needs to be this independent outside force in progressive politics to push the Democratic Party and others on the left to keep their eyes on the prize when these things happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways the 2008 sort of lifted a veneer off of sort of what is a bigger sort of systemic and structural problem. I mean, I think during the Bush years, people were talking about inequality, but it was pegged directly to what was perceived to be the Bush administration, when in fact it's sort of a much larger problem.
Well, exactly. And of course that story has evolved and kind of bubbled up and emerged over the last few years, and very much so just within the last 6 months, I think, where I think it's become clear. I mean, perhaps, actually I should say it's bubbled up over the last couple of years really strongly, probably starting with the fact that the Republicans nominated the poster boy for plutocracy in the last election, and that kind of vividly illustrated, I think, for people, for a lot of us, for what was going on. But, this isn't a partisan problem. I mean, I think that's been demonstrated. We have a system that's marinating in money and is almost overwhelmed by it. And that's become very clear, and we used to see that through the partisan lens. I think it was easier to see that. I mean, that sort of falls into the kind of image and sort of stereotypes that we think of. And of course, the Republicans, let's not forget, I mean, they really are the poster boys for this. It's not, the Democrats are doing it as well, but, the Republicans, they're the ones who make a real profit at it. So, I think that that's been the story and will continue to be the story for some time to come. And it's been a very interesting educational process for someone like me who had followed politics for decades, and had, a certain kind of just fundamental understanding going back to, freshman in college about, what you do in recession and the idea that you would stimulate the economy when there was a lack of demand. I mean, these were really basic Econ 101 kind of concepts, and suddenly here we were in the midst of this crisis and seeing something as bizarre as clear-cut criminal behavior on the part of the financial wizards on Wall Street, and being told that there wasn't anything that we could do about it because they were too big to fail and, the economy was too fragile and things like that. I mean, that shook up my entire worldview, despite the fact that I think I was reasonably cynical about elites. This took it to a new level. So I think we're now sitting here watching this from a different place than we were 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, I remember, I think like Kevin Drum wrote something about how that episode in 2008, I think he said it radicalized him. I don't know that it actually did, but I mean, he was, he's someone who I think was, sort of a centrist of sorts. And I don't know why that pops into my head as you're talking about how 2008 sort of reoriented everybody. I mean, one of the things too that strikes me that it seems to still, that never got the emphasis that it should have, was that it was really Newt Gingrich who attacked Romney more than anyone else, and I include President Obama in this, from almost like the populist, I don't know, left, but with populism, and it just goes to show just how reluctant, in some respects, how much it's even that much more dangerous for Democrats to do, because it's almost as if they're afraid that something like that will catch fire.
Well, I think that's true, don't you? I mean, isn't there? I keep hearing this, and I think that it's actually quite obvious at this point that the one thing that people fear at this point is populism, from whatever direction it's coming. I mean, whether it's Occupy or it's some Looney Tune with a bunch of automatic weapons running around in a militia. Whatever you want to say is that there's a feeling, I think, among the elites for the first time. I mean, you would have thought that after 2008 they would have felt this immediately, just as a matter of survival, but they didn't, and it's a testament to their own sense of, privilege that they didn't see this. But this kind of discontent, it cannot hold, and I think that they're finally beginning to see this. I keep hearing, sort of rumblings that even among the Democratic donor class, for instance, there's an argument going on as to how they should embrace this populism and use it. And of course the right they've been professionalizing that particular strategy for many years on how to harness the populist right. And so there's a lot of very, very, let's just say, tremulous people with a lot of influence and money trying to figure out how to deal with this. And of course, to those of us who are following this, it really isn't that difficult. I mean, you can look at the various solutions that are out there that would probably do some good. And I'm not saying it isn't complicated, but the idea of this vast wealth flowing to the top, and of course it seems to grow exponentially, right? I mean, the more they have, the more they make. I'm still struck by this amazing number to me that the Koch brothers in 2011 were worth $50 billion. They are now worth $100 billion. Now, I mean, that's just shocking. $100 billion. I mean, that's an amazing amount of money, and it shows, and they are politically dedicated, committed to changing the country, the world, and putting through policies and electing politicians who reflect their belief system, which is radical. It is very radical. And they have got $100 billion. Yeah. That's a lot of money to work with in politics, even by, our overall standards. And so, this is the kind of thing I think that I had never contemplated before. I mean, I have to admit that the last time I thought about stuff like this was when, reading some history about the Gilded Age and thinking that the lessons had been learned. And evidently that's not the case, and so we're sort of going into this in a supercharged fashion at this point.
They could literally put in $500 million into every state in the country, which would it seems to me would basically change the politics in each one of those states dramatically. And they would still be back around what their 2012 net worth would be.
That's right.
Just if they wanted to do that tomorrow, it's been a 2-year, 3-year setback, but we'll get back on it. And
yeah, no problem. Yeah. I mean, that's an outrageous number, isn't it? I mean, and the money that they are putting in, which everybody, oh my gosh, Sheldon Adelson's putting in $100 million, and the Kochs are putting in this and blah blah blah. It's pocket change. I mean, it literally is pocket change. It's the equivalent of what, I went down and spent at Trader Joe's yesterday to my income. And these people can do this. And and that should be disturbing. I often put up on my blog, and I put it up on an article in Salon, too, recently, this sort of, this picture of what, $1 billion looks like.
Do you think that this Piketty book has gotten so much attention, and this is the book. I mean, we've talked about it on this program, but this is it's a book put out by a French. I don't know if he's an economist, but it's more of like a economic history. The argument is made from sort of more a historical standpoint. And the theory is quite simple. Just as the economy grows, capital gets a rate of return that's greater than the economy. And it's a fairly straightforward argument. If you have money, it's easier for you to make money at a rate faster than the economy grows, and then inequality grows. And to the extent that we've had periods in history where it hasn't been the case, those have been anomalies. What accounts for the you almost can't go to a website now that's not reviewing this book. It is, I certainly am not aware of any book that has gotten this much attention. What accounts for it? Do you think it's like a broader awareness of those at the top? I mean, it seems to me on some level it's like in 2008, the wealthy they were concerned with losing their money, and now in 2014 they realize like, oh wow, we did a really good job in not losing our money. we have gotten virtually all the gains that have been made over the past 6 years. I wonder if that's going to be a problem. I mean, what's driving this?
Well, I mean, the book is kind of it's creating a sensation among people who think about this stuff for sure. And I mean, to me, it seems, and I have to say at the outset, I haven't read it, so I'm not going to comment.
Well, nobody
on
has.
the substance,
I think everybody's just read reviews.
We're just
at
commenting
this
on the comment on the atmosphere around it, which is very interesting. And the fact that I think that the way you just described the the thesis, it's sort of backed up by common sense, right? People sort of know, it takes money to make money, that kind of concept. But we've been living under this illusion, at least in America, and I don't know how this is being received over in Europe or elsewhere. But in America, we had this American dream, right, which was really a dream of the middle class. There was always the idea that you could perhaps become rich. You got lucky, you had a good idea, you could do certain, follow certain rules, and maybe you'd get ahead. But the essential American dream was the dream of a middle class, having a good job, being able to buy a house, better life for your children, that sort of thing. And it was a kind of a sense of economic security. People weren't going to fall backwards. You were always going to grow a little bit, generation to generation, and maybe some of you would jump up, very, very much higher in the next generation. But this book and this sort of realization that we're having is that whole thing was kind of an accident, and that really the truth is that we were sort of, there was a period of, as you say, sort of anomalous kind of economic activity. And in the book, I believe it comes, specifically in the U.S., it comes from World War I through World War II, and all the events that transpired in between were the anomalous sort of events that created this possibility of a more equal, egalitarian economic system for a while. And now we've sort of gone back to the norm, where the rich get richer and everybody else just kind of struggles. So I think that there's this sense that, we've been feeling that we've been losing our grip, and this kind of validates the fact that historically that's always been the case. And, I don't know how to feel about that. I mean, I don't know about you, but that makes me feel kind of despairing because I don't see the mechanism for how you change that. I'm not going to root for catastrophe.
Right. I mean, and it also seems as if there's almost like two separate conversations going on. There's sort of like one conversation going on within, those people who look at politics and sort of contemplate, see a connection between systems and policy, and then there's the sort of the other conversation that's going on that is really just about the sort of day-to-day politics, where there doesn't seem to be this sort of broader awareness. I mean, you linked to a piece the other day, a conversation between Thomas Frank and Louis Lapham on sort of how, I guess, sort of revolutionary drive is sort of consumed by the beast and then sort of spit back out in a sort of more processed form. I mean, just today there were polls out showing that the Republicans are perhaps on the verge of a Republican wave, and there's just a broad sense that something's wrong, and there's, the answer is, well, it's just vote in, the party that's not in power. I guess the challenge is, how does the rubber meet the road, as it were? I mean, how in the sort of culture that we have today in society does the idea that, like, look, things are one way because of a sort of a broader systemic problem, how does that end up getting translated to people who don't really pay attention to this stuff?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, honestly,
You won the Hillman Prize. I know you know the answer, Digby.
I wish I did. Then I could, win a bunch of prizes. I have no doubt if I had the answer to that question. I do think that there is some value in this, rising sense of populism, and I think that, for me, and I don't know, I'm not going to try and address the long-term systemic problem through this, but just in terms of the political problem, we have this issue with money in politics, and it's infecting both parties to such an extent that we almost feel like, we're being drowned in it. It's very difficult to see how you get beyond that particular stranglehold. But democracy still does sort of exist. I mean, we do still have a vote, and the rich people do only get one vote. And to the extent that there is something interesting happening, I see the Democrats are starting to sense that there is value in clarity, in portraying themselves as different from the Republicans. And that's a first that I've seen in the last 25 years, really since Reagan, where the Democratic strategists are seeing that there is some usefulness. And you're seeing this in some of these red state Senate races, where they're actually kind of coming up with their own populist messaging, which is unusual for them, because normally what they would be doing is trying as hard as they can to blur the distinctions between them and the Republicans. Maybe it's a desperation move. I don't know. They figure, hey, we're losing anyway, so let's just go for it. But that would not be like them. That would be very unusual for Democrats to look at anything that way. So, it may be that what we're coming to in our two-party system is a period of intense clarity, a real political argument, one in which we're going to see some, people being able for the first time in a long time to see a real division between the two parties, two very distinct philosophies and ideologies driving them. Now, I'm saying all that within the context of big money still running everything. So whether or not that's even possible, I don't know. Maybe we'll have some, rich liberal plutocrats who will decide that they want to, that they want to finance something like this. There's a possibility that we may be coming into a period where the lines are more starkly drawn. Now, maybe that's a bad thing. I don't happen to think so. I think that people, that we still, if we believe that we have some kind of a democratic system, it's a good idea for people to know what they're voting for and to have a real sense of what that is.